Today we're going to be exploring finding your appropriate wide-legged stance. So start off taking a moment just standing in neutral. And you can take your hands and you can feel your hips, feel the dip in your low back, feel the angle of your lower belly, just to get an idea of where your back is in a neutral stance. Now, it's important to note that we are not doing anything intentional or forceful with our pelvis here. You're just standing naturally, nice and relaxed. You're not intentionally tucking your tailbone or anything like that. Now, you can keep your hands on your low back, your belly, or both. And you're just going to, 1 foot at a time, take small steps outward. And what you're doing is you're monitoring with your hands and your internal sense of feeling if your pelvis starts to tip forward. So if it does tip forward, you're just going to step it back a little bit. You're going to make your stance just a little narrow again. You might need to start over from the beginning. You want your pelvis to stay neutral like it was when you were just standing normally without forcing it to stay neutral. So only go so wide that your pelvis can keep its neutral position. So I'm going to show you this from side angles so that you can kind of watch me slowly come into this wide-legged stance. I'm monitoring the angle of my pelvis, the dip of my low back, the angle of my lower belly. And in a moment here, I'm going to let my foot slide a little wider so that you can see how that changes. All right, so I'm going to play that again and I'm going to slow it right down. So it's fairly subtle, but if you watch the creases in my pants just below my right hip, you'll watch as they disappear as my pelvis tips forward. You may have also noticed my front hand lowering down. So I'm just going to bring my stance back to the one where my pelvis is nice and neutral. So now that you've found your wide-legged stance, however wide or narrow it is, we're going to put it to the test. We're going to refine it. So we're going to work on lifting the ball of a foot and spinning on that heel. The movement's coming from your hip joint. If there's any kind of dropping that happens in the hip on the side that you're moving the foot, when you rotate your hip, just narrow your stance a little bit. Now, once your foot is turned out, you can place the ball of the foot down. So I'm just demonstrating that here. See how my hands, my hips, my pelvis are staying pretty level. I'm going to intentionally widen my stance here, and I'm going to show you how my pelvis goes unlevel when I let the ball of that foot drop. And it even kind of moves a bit when I'm just turning out my hip joint. So I'm just going to speed this up and repeat it a few times so that you can observe this. See how my whole upper body shifts. So I'm going to come back to a healthier wide-legged stance for myself here, and I'm just going to revisit turning out 1 hip at a time, dropping the ball of the foot, lifting it up, bringing it back to neutral. Okay. And then we're going to move into having both feet turned out. Okay. So both feet are now turned out because both hips are turned out. I'm going to place my hands behind my thighs, gently press them into my hands as I bend the knees. And this is goddess pose, at least the legs for goddess pose. Watching that your knees are tracking with your toes and that you're not feeling strain in that inner knee. You can keep it nice and shallow.